Let's go to foreign policy here. There's a little story in the news that you may have heard of. If you have not, here we go. So yes, this did happen. Xi Jinping actually did meet with Vladimir Putin in Moscow. And there are multiple talks that are happening here. Now, some people are wondering why in the world would Xi even go meet with him, considering that there has been this arrest warrant supposedly issued for Putin by the ICC. But he went to meet with him anyway. And I actually did get a recent update right before I went live about something else that happened between them. But let's go ahead and get into this story here. Again, China and Russia meet. Let's get into it.
We're going to turn now to Russia tonight. China's President Xi arriving for a 3-day summit in Moscow with his so-called peace plan. This is the first visit since Russia invaded Ukraine. The images tonight, you can see Xi given the red carpet treatment, serenaded by a military band in Russia. Vladimir Putin then welcoming his, quote, dear friend to the Kremlin. The two meeting for more than 4 hours. And of course, the question remains tonight, will China help Russia in this war in Ukraine? The White House tonight pressed on that, given this meeting in Moscow, and ABC's Tom Soufi-Burridge in Ukraine again tonight.
Tonight, Vladimir Putin rolling out the red carpet for China's President Xi, kicking off a 3-day state visit. Xi arriving with a peace plan on his first trip to Moscow since Russia invaded Ukraine.
So notice they said he arrives with a peace plan. So this is important for people to hear, right? That it sounds like they're going to try to work something out in reference to peace. Like, that would be good. That's what a lot of us have been asking for. Like, in this, let's just get some type of peace now. But the United States government doesn't see it that way. The United States government sees this as a bad combination of those two forces joining together. You may hear, and I'm saying this because you may hear later on this week, mainstream media outlets making this sound like they're joining forces together to escalate the war. But from what I understand, from what I have read, and from what I've watched so far, it sounds like they may be trying to discuss some type of peace plan. And then I have a surprise for you later on.
China and Russia saying their relationship is entering a new era. The world's most powerful autocrats greeting each other with smiles, meeting inside the Kremlin for more than 4 hours as they seek to challenge the West as they aim to potentially shift the global balance of power to their favor.
That's what the fear is really about, by the way, shifting the balance of power to their favor. Because remember, the United States government wants to be number one. They don't want another country to beat them economically. Now, obviously, they're not going to come out and say it that way that I just said, but it's true. China has 5 of the top 10 banks in the world. The United States, we are not in the top 5. We don't even appear till number 6, and that's Bank of America. Or is that JP Morgan? It's JP Morgan, sorry. We appear number 6 in this JP Morgan. So just keep that in mind. I have to speed up through this part right here because of the footage. Sorry about that, guys. Here we go.
Charged Putin with war crimes. Today, Xi calling him a dear friend. Putin saying he carefully studied China's initiatives to end the war, adding he'll treat them with respect. David recently pressing President Biden on this notion of China providing a peace plan to end the Ukraine war.
What do you make of this Chinese peace plan floated overnight that Putin is now applauding today?
I think you answered the question. Putin's applauding it. So how could it be any good? I'm not being...
You see what's happening here? So again, it's a peace plan. And Biden's saying, well, it can't be good if Putin is applauding it.
I'm being facetious. I'm being deadly earnest. I've seen nothing in the plan that would indicate that there is something that would be beneficial to anyone other than Russia if the Chinese plan were followed.
In other words, he saw nothing in the plan that would be beneficial to the United States government. That's what that really means. He's not going to say that, though.
So the idea that China is going to be negotiating the outcome of a war that's a totally unjust war for Ukraine is just not rational.
Tonight,
But it's okay for the U.S. government to negotiate.
with Xi and Putin side by side, the White House pressed on when the president plans to talk to Xi.
We'll do that at the most appropriate time. It's important that we keep those lines of communication open, particularly now when tensions are so high.
So let's bring in Tom Sufi Burridge with us live tonight from Kyiv. And Tom, we know this high-stakes meeting between China's President Xi and Vladimir Putin continues tomorrow. And tonight, the White House continuing to warn Beijing not to provide lethal aid to Russia.
Yeah, David, U.S. officials are waiting to see what exactly comes out of this summit. But tonight, the White House said it's not in China's best interest to supply weapons to Russia. If they did, they would be helping Mr. Putin, quote, slaughter innocent Ukrainians. David?
All eyes on that meeting.
Yeah, I don't think that's what, but see, for me, like when I heard about this, I don't think that that was what they were trying to do. I think they were trying to make other negotiations, and you're going to hear about those. Now, there's another clip I want to share with you as well. Now, this one also talks a little bit about the peace plan, but you actually get to listen to a little bit of that meeting, so to speak. This is from the BBC. BBC One. BBC Two.
China's leader Xi Jinping is continuing his high-profile state visit to Russia, where he's been warmly greeted as an old friend by President Putin. Beijing's billed this visit as a trip for peace. Mr. Putin said that Moscow was always open to negotiation.
So again, that's what, the third or fourth time you've heard peace. And that he's open to negotiations. Didn't they try to ask for negotiations from the very beginning? Didn't they try to negotiate in the very beginning? But peace is not profitable. People have to understand that. There's no money in peace. That's the problem.
But the Americans have already warned that China's negotiation plan on Ukraine could be just a delaying tactic. From Moscow, our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg reports.
Just 3 days ago, Vladimir Putin was named as a war crime suspect by the International Criminal Court. But that didn't stop China's president flying in and shaking his hand. Putin and Xi have met many times before, but never before has Russia's president been under such pressure. His war in Ukraine not going at all according to plan. Xi Jinping called Vladimir Putin his dear friend, his strategic partner. The Kremlin leader said they would discuss China's peace initiative. But there is no detailed Chinese plan to end the war in Ukraine. What Moscow...
Is that true, though? Let's go on.
...would like from Beijing is lethal aid to help it win. Beijing's been reluctant to provide that to prevent secondary sanctions against Chinese companies. But it has been supplying dual-use technology, like semiconductor chips, that the Russian military can use. The Kremlin also wants to expand trade with China. With Russia under heavy international sanctions, economic ties with Beijing are proving a lifeline.
That piece right there that they just said is really important for you to hear, that they want to have trade with China. So Russia wants to have trade with China. Remember, when the U.S. government put sanctions on Russia, that actually did not make Russia crumble. Russia has still been able to thrive, even though the sanctions are put on them. And actually, the sanctions that were implemented onto Russia have actually proven to be worse for other countries. It's been proven to be worse for North Korea. Remember, I was telling you about the story in North Korea where they're running out of food. They have a serious food shortage. Part of that is because they get their fertilizer from Russia. And because of the sanctions put on Russia, they can't distribute that fertilizer to those countries that usually would get it. The UK is suffering. They're having to go to warm banks to get heat because they can't afford to pay for heat because, again, go back to the pipeline. This is all connected. So when they got rid of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, that seems to have hurt countries like the UK and countries like Germany more than it's hurting Russia. So the sanctions that the U.S. government put on Russia has actually, in a sense, backfired. Let's go on.
If you burn bridges with the West, as Vladimir Putin has, what do you do then? You look east. That's exactly what the Kremlin leader has done. Recent events have accelerated Russia's dependency on China. Putin and Xi may speak about mutually beneficial cooperation, but Beijing looks increasingly like the senior partner.
China is on the move. Let me tell you something. So Russia was like, okay, US, you want to put sanctions on us? Okay. China, what's up? China, we covered this with Danny Haifong a couple of days ago. China shaking hands with Saudi Arabia, saying, let's work together. Saudi Arabia is a partner of the United States. That was a bold move, in my opinion. China trying to help, although there are disagreements about this, but China trying to help countries in Africa. And now China possibly trying to help Russia. You know what that says to the US government? We may not always be on top economically anymore. It says to the US government that these countries may not need you for much longer, and they may be able to thrive and have an economic system on their own without the US intervention. And I think that is very scary. I think it's very scary for the US government. Economically, countries like China are doing pretty well.
But Moscow hasn't just partnered with Beijing. Last week, Russia held joint naval exercises with China and Iran. There are signs the Kremlin is looking to forge an anti-Western alliance.
Putin is building his own bloc. He doesn't trust the West anymore. He's looking for allies and trying to make Russia part of a common fortress with China, as well as with India, Latin America, and Africa.
Could you imagine if all of them come together? See, this is the thing, is like they said that he doesn't trust the West anymore. I can understand why. I mean, it's just, I'm just being honest. I can understand why. But could you imagine if all of them come together? So you have BRICS, but if they add other countries to that as well, this is something that I think, maybe not Joe Biden, he doesn't seem to be with it, but this is something that I think that the Biden administration is very afraid of. This is what they did not want to happen.
Putin is building his own anti-Western world.
Now, with Xi Jinping here, Russia can claim that it's not isolated, that Moscow has powerful allies who view the world through a similar lens, that it doesn't need the West if it has friends in the East. But experience shows China always puts China first.
Well, today the talks between the two men begin in earnest. Earlier, I spoke with our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg, in Moscow, and I asked him how the visit was being perceived by the Russian public.
You see the word drug, friend, in the headlines on a lot of the papers since both leaders addressed each other as dear friends. Earlier this week, there was a little bit of scepticism. Some commentators saying, well, look, the reality is that China will always defend its national interests first and put itself first. So, yes, you can talk about a bromance, you can talk about a strategic partnership, deepening cooperation between Russia and China. But I think people are open-eyed here and understand that China has its interests at heart first of all. And
doesn't the US do that as well? Doesn't the US government always put itself first too, and put our own interests first as well?
And also there is an understanding that despite the talk of partnership and a no-limits partnership, this is not a partnership of equals anymore. That very much now, China is the senior partner here, that Russia is very dependent on China for
everyone. A lot of us. It's not just Russia, the United States, like we also depend on China as well. Listen, until we start making all of our products in America again, we do depend on them. Look at your products. Look at them, guys. Who made it? Look on the back of it. I don't even think we made this shirt. Chances are, if I check the tag, it'll say made in China. Let's just be real. Let's be honest and keep it real here. Now, there was an update right before I went live, and shout out to Mario for posting this, like literally like right before I went live. Mario posted breaking: Putin and Xi Jinping signed documents on Russia-China strategic cooperation. Putin made the following comments. Here we go. China is clearly Russia's top trade and economic partner. Trade and economic cooperation is a priority for our relationship. Russia is prepared to increase its oil and LNG supply to China. Russia is helping to build atomic stations in China. The Ukraine-Russia peace plan was also discussed. Russia and China strongly oppose violating interests of other countries to gain our own advantage. Should the U.S. be afraid of strengthening relations between Russia and China? And here's the video here where they are signing documents.
俄罗斯联邦总统弗拉基米尔·普京和中华人民共和国主席习近平会谈结束后，亲自稳定仪式现在开始。
Президент Российской Федерации Владимир Владимирович Путин и председатель Китайской Народной Республики Си Цзиньпин подписывают совместное заявление Российской Федерации и Китайской Народной Республики об углублении отношений всеобъемлющего партнерства и стратегического взаимодействия, вступающих в новую эпоху, и совместное заявление президента Российской Федерации и председателя Китайской Народной Республики о плане развития ключевых направлений российской...
Yeah, sorry guys, this is not in English. I am so sorry. There's no translation.
Китайского экономического сотрудничества до 2030 года.
俄罗斯联邦总统普京和中华人民共和国主席。
So they signed the documents there. And what I wanted to say is, like, guys, this is huge. You have China forming or actually not forming, but strengthening relations with Russia. And you have China making agreements with Saudi Arabia. Everybody pay attention to what's going on. Again, it's just really interesting to me that they tried to smear peace. They even tried to smear, like they're saying, like, let's talk about peace deals. Even mainstream media is trying to smear that because they don't really want peace. Because if they have peace, they can't profit off of this war anymore. And that's what it's all about. And that's why they keep getting all these different wars. Like, how you pull people out of it? Not all of them, but how do you pull most of the troops out of Afghanistan and then you get us into this? How do you do that? All about money. All about money. Shout out to Afeni. Afeni says, donate to my Cuba fundraiser, guys. Yeah, if you follow Afeni on Twitter, her name is Afeni on Twitter, follow her on there. And so you can donate to her fundraiser. She's doing trying to go there for a May Day event and donate supplies to them. JB says, Sabby, former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett admitted that Boris Johnson intervened to make sure no peace talks happened between Zelensky and Putin. And where is Boris Johnson now? Nowhere. I forget what movie that's from. They said, where are you going? Nowhere. Someone in the chat might remember. Violin says they didn't ship manufacturing to China to benefit U.S. working class, FYI. Nowhere. We'll finish this up here.
习近平签署俄罗斯联邦和中华人民共和国关于深化新时代全面战略协作伙伴关系的联合声明，以及俄罗斯联邦总统和中华人民共和国主席关于2030年前俄中经济合作重点方向发展规划的联合声明。
I think I was muted, but I was trying to say, yes, Boondock Saints. That's where it's from. Yes. Thank you. Did I put that back up there? Where'd he go? Yes, that's where the nowhere's from. Sorry.
В рамках государственного визита председателя Китайской Народной Республики в Россию также подписан ряд межправительственных, межведомственных и корпоративных документов о развитии российско-китайского сотрудничества в различных сферах.
中国主席对俄罗斯年轻国事访问框架下， 双方还签。
See, that's the second time in the past couple of days I've seen Xi Jinping shake hands with another leader. And honestly, I can't be mad. Like you really can't. Like, honestly, this could have been us. We could have been shaking hands with other countries instead of, I don't know, stealing their resources. We could have been shaking hands with other countries instead of bombing their cities. Things like that. It's terrible. It's terrible when you think about it. I sincerely hope you're not joking around. Richard said, Sabby, did you know the British press plans to bring Boris back in a few years? They already talked about when the time is right for Boris to come back, even in the BBC. They are priming the public. Oh my God. I sincerely hope not. Sincerely. Jeez. And then we have the aspect too to think about. Mexico is also in talks of possibly joining BRICS. If that happens, it'll be BRICSM. But do you guys see what's happening? These other countries, they're coming together and they're saying, you know what? We're not really going to try to work with the US anymore, bud. They don't really care about our people, man. All they really care about is oil and resources. So they all decide to come together and do their own thing. Can't be mad at it. It's actually pretty smart. There's an old saying that says, if you can't beat them, join them, right? But if you can't join them, then what do? You form your own shit. I'm sorry, but it is what it is. But that's what's happening right now, guys. Huge, huge story. I'll continue to keep an eye on it.